and this is Rav David Aaron from Oraita, an Israelite. All his books are about God. So Rav David Aaron said, well, Rav Kook, he is the person to speak about God's title. There's a chapter on God. So then, what's amazing about the chapter on God, by the way, is if you read the beginning piece, it's about atheism. In other words, you're expecting him to convince you to believe in God, but he does the complete opposite. He legitimizes the atheist. And this is what makes him so unique. He thinks the atheists... Here, I'll read a small piece.
Cleansing the world.
Yeah, it's an amazing piece. Why not read it? We're here. Yeah, so this is the chapter on God. It's the third chapter of the book. And this is just one small piece of Rav Kook. It's just a shocking thing for a rabbi to say. Okay, so here, let's read this. Sometimes one finds an atheist who has a powerful inner faith that is much greater than the weaker faith of thousands of believers. This principle is true regarding individuals as well as generations. In other words, he looks at an atheist and he hears the words coming out of their mouth, I don't believe in God, but underneath their words, in other words, between the lines, why they don't believe in God. They don't believe in God because they don't believe that the guy in the sky telling them they're going to go to hell if they don't do this mitzvah. They don't believe that. In other words, there's something inside them that refuses to believe that that's God. So they say, I don't believe in God. So Rav Kook says, yeah, you're getting closer to God. In that very denial of God, there's something very spiritual and religious in that very doubt. So he says some atheists, they're actually more religious than people who say the word God. And here, let me read this passage. This is I'm as shocked as you are when you read it. Don't think it's my book, therefore I didn't write it. I wrote the book, but the words are from him.
Yes, him speaking.
So
he's weighing in on this discussion.
So listen to this. This is just incredible. We should not be intimidated if after a long period of the Jewish people's influence upon the world, that atheism returns and spreads. The main point is not the words people use, but the inner transformation of the individual soul in the greater world. Within is the light of God and the wisdom of God, even when it is spoken in the words of atheism. In other words, for Rav Kook, even if people don't use the word God anymore, it doesn't threaten him. Because what he's interested in isn't what words you use, but how you use words and what you're using behind the words. So if a person says the word God all day long, but they're rude to people, they're cruel to people, they're insensitive to people, which by the way is the way I used to act, saying Baruch Hashem all the time, but being judgmental to people. For Rav Kook, what did you do by using the word God? God is irrelevant. That word is irrelevant. On the other hand, if you use the word ethics, instincts, my intuition, I believe in morals, and you're willing to sacrifice your life for something greater, for something deep, Rav Kook would say that is what it means to believe in God. And whether or not you use the word or not doesn't matter. So you have here a rabbi, and this is what was so shocking for me, who really he's so inclusive. So I started writing about God, and really just every chapter is just for me I had just another like an epiphany. Wow, he talks about art and creativity. So I put all these translations about art and creativity, and then he starts talking about vegetarianism. And then he starts talking about, he compliments Jesus. Which rabbi compliments Jesus? It's a crazy thing. And then, by the way, he gets insulted and told off for complimenting Jesus, and then he writes a letter back defending himself for complimenting Jesus. It's just his relationship to other religions. It's fascinating. So really, it was, for me, writing this book was, for me, a journey towards my own self-discovery of myself through Rav Kook, and in that way I find it a very personal book on one hand, and on the other hand, I just want to give it to everybody because I think it's so relevant.
So you touched on a point that I just want to kind of clarify a little bit, if it's okay. So elsewhere, Rav Kook writes in Yisrael Tchiyato, which is the back of Orot, Rav Kook writes about atheism, where he says atheism is a necessity, Bisman Hazeh, because for many, many people, their perception and their understanding of what it means to be a personality of faith, to be a person who has belief in God, is so confused. Their definition of God and of godliness and of seeking God is so confused that atheism as a temporary kedusha, says Rav Kook. There's a temporary sanctity to atheism because atheism exists to rid the world of that preconceived logic, which all too often becomes an impediment to truly coming to have a relationship with God.
Can I add something just quickly to that? So I remember
Yeah.
reading The God Delusion, I don't know, 2-3 years ago by, it's by, right? Dawkins, right? And everyone said you shouldn't read that book. The God Delusion is going to turn you off religion. It's too dangerous. So after studying Rav Kook, not only did I not disagree with the book, I agreed with the book. In other words, everything Dawkins says, his questions, they're so honest. In other words, he says, how could religion do these disgusting things? How could people use the word God and be so cruel to people? Now, Dawkins' conclusion is don't use the word God anymore, or don't follow religion. But Rav Kook would say your questions are so honest. And in that way, and it's an amazing thing, there's a passage in the book where he says sometimes, this is, again, it's just so shocking for a person to read. I am just as shocked as you. He says, sometimes you read a book by a rabbi and it turns you off God. Sometimes you read a book by an atheist and it turns you on to God. Now it's just such honesty, and instead of defending the word God, he's trying to defend God. In other words, what is God for Rav Kook? It's the spirit of truth in the world, the spirit of meaning, of that yearning for goodness, for honesty, for intellectual honesty, and Dawkins is portraying that. So yeah, in that way, atheism, it actually is min hashamayim, it's from God.